Living there as you do in Venezuela, do you feel a sense of anxiety really about the next few days and weeks?
Throughout modern history, there are moments when political leaders stop being treated as diplomats and start being treated as strategic threats. It does not happen lightly. It happens when governments believe a single individual is shaping the fate of an entire nation and destabilizing a region far beyond its borders. In these moments, the question quietly emerges inside intelligence agencies and military planning rooms. What if removing one person could change everything? This question has followed figures like Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, Osama bin Laden, and today, it hovers around Venezuela's president, Nicolás Maduro. The idea of a hunt is not a movie fantasy. It is a way governments think when diplomacy fails, sanctions stall, and political pressure reaches its limits. But these operations are never simple, never clean, and never free of consequences. To understand why Maduro is even discussed in this context, it is necessary to understand how Venezuela reached this point. If you find this story valuable, consider subscribing to the channel. Venezuela's slow collapse. Venezuela was once one of the richest countries in Latin America. It sat on the largest proven oil reserves in the world. Its currency was strong. Its cities were growing. Then everything changed. Years of political centralization, economic mismanagement, and corruption hollowed out the state. Under Hugo Chavez and later Nicolás Maduro, Venezuela's economy became almost entirely dependent on oil revenue. And when oil prices collapsed, the country had nothing left to fall back on. Hyperinflation followed. Food shortages, power failures, hospitals without medicine. Millions of Venezuelans fled across borders into Colombia, Brazil, and beyond. What began as an economic crisis became a humanitarian one. And what began as domestic instability began to affect the entire region. This is where Venezuela stopped being just a troubled country and started becoming a geopolitical problem. Why leaders become strategic targets. In most wars, militaries fight armies, but in asymmetric conflicts, the center of gravity is often a single leader. When a political system becomes highly centralized, removing that leader can destabilize or collapse the entire structure. This is why figures like Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi were treated not just as politicians, but as military objectives. Targeting a leader is not about revenge. It is about control. Leaders make decisions about alliances, oil, weapons, and international alignment. When those decisions threaten regional stability or global interests, pressure builds to neutralize that influence. But history shows that removing a leader does not always bring stability. Sometimes it creates chaos. That risk is what makes these operations so controversial and so rare. Why Maduro is seen as a flashpoint. Nicolás Maduro does not just govern Venezuela. He controls one of the most strategically valuable energy positions in the world. Venezuela holds enormous reserves of heavy crude oil, the type needed by major refineries in the United States and elsewhere. At the same time, Maduro's government has aligned itself with geopolitical rivals of the U.S., including Russia, Iran, and China. That alignment turns Venezuela into more than a failed state. It becomes a node in a larger power struggle. When a country controls critical resources and hosts rival influence, its leadership becomes strategically significant. That is what places Maduro in the category of leaders who attract global attention. What hunting a leader actually means. In popular culture, a hunt looks like a chase. In reality, it is a slow, intelligence-driven process. Modern high-value target operations begin with information, satellite imagery, human sources, financial tracking, communications intercepts, and diplomatic signals. These data streams are combined to build a constantly updated picture of where a leader moves, who protects them, and how their power is structured. The goal is not just to find a person. It is to understand their entire ecosystem, their security, their inner circle, their political dependencies. But knowing where someone is does not mean acting on it. Every move carries enormous risk, not just to soldiers, but to international stability. Why such operations are rare? Targeting a sitting head of state is one of the most dangerous decisions a government can make. It risks war, retaliation, and global condemnation. Even when leaders are hostile, removing them can create power vacuums, civil wars, and refugee crises. Libya is a clear example. Gaddafi's fall did not bring peace. It brought chaos that continues today. This is why governments usually try everything else first: sanctions, negotiations, economic pressure, diplomatic isolation. Military action against a leader is the option of last resort. And even then, it is debated endlessly behind closed doors. How high-value target operations. When governments decide that a single individual represents a strategic threat, they do not begin with soldiers. They begin with intelligence. Modern high-value target operations are built on months or even years of surveillance, analysis, and pattern tracking. Every movement, every meeting, every financial transaction, and every communication is used to construct a picture of how a leader lives and how they are protected. This process is slow and deliberate. It is designed to reduce uncertainty, not eliminate it. Special operations units do not act unless decision-makers believe the political, military, and diplomatic costs are worth the risk. Even then, the operation is often delayed or cancelled multiple times as new information changes the equation. What makes these missions so complex is that they do not exist in isolation. They occur inside a web of alliances, treaties, and rival powers that react to every move. Historical precedents. History provides several examples of how states have approached leaders they viewed as destabilizing forces. Saddam Hussein was targeted during the Iraq War because he controlled the military, the oil fields, and the political system. His removal was seen as a way to collapse the entire regime. Muammar Gaddafi was treated the same way during NATO's intervention in Libya. Once he fell, the structure that held Libya together disintegrated. Osama bin Laden was a different case, not a head of state, but the symbolic leader of a global network. His elimination was meant to disrupt operations and send a message. These cases show a pattern. Targeting leaders is always tied to larger strategic goals, not just punishment. Why Venezuela is different. Venezuela is not an isolated battlefield. It sits in the Western Hemisphere, close to U.S. borders, energy supply routes, and key shipping lanes. Any major military operation there would immediately draw regional and global attention. Russia and China both have political and economic ties to Venezuela. Iran has also established a presence. That means any action against Venezuela's leadership would not just affect Caracas. It would ripple through global alliances. This makes Venezuela far more sensitive than past cases in the Middle East or North Africa. It is not a distant conflict. It is a geopolitical flashpoint. The risks no one can control. Removing a leader does not remove the forces beneath them. Power struggles follow. Armed groups compete. Civilian populations suffer. In Venezuela's case, millions of people are already displaced. The economy is fragile. The institutions are weakened. A sudden political shock could trigger chaos that spreads across borders. That risk is one of the main reasons why such scenarios remain hypothetical rather than operational. If this content has been helpful so far, please subscribe for more stories like this. Why these scenarios are still studied. Governments do not plan because they want to act. They plan because history has proven what happens when they don't. Scenarios like Venezuela are studied not out of ambition, but out of necessity. They allow military and political leaders to trace the fault lines of power, mapping risks, responses, and consequences long before reality removes the luxury of choice. This is not about aggression. It is about preparation when the cost of surprise is measured in nations, not headlines. The hunt for Maduro is not a call to action. It is a framework for understanding how modern power truly operates. When a single leader controls a nation's resources, alliances, and political direction, that individual becomes more than a politician. They become a strategic variable, one capable of destabilizing regions, markets, and global security. And in every era, when power becomes dangerously concentrated, someone has to balance the scale. Someone has to stand between chaos and consequence. For the United States, doing nothing was not an option. Faced with a leader many viewed as unpredictable and dangerous, the question was never simple, and the choice was never clean. Decisions made at this level are not judged in the moment, but over decades. Only history will determine whether the path taken was the right one, or merely the least disastrous option available at the time. Because in the world of power, influence, and survival, inaction is often a decision of its own, and the cost of waiting can be far greater than the cost of acting.